Okay, so I've got my second drawing set up. I've got the border, and I've drawn the horizon line in. At 8.75, again, it's kind of splitting the open area in here. But what we're going to draw now is we're going to draw this bookshelf. And again, perspective drawing, you don't necessarily use measurements, but we're going to start this out with some very specific measurements where, it's a weird scale, but the bookshelf is supposed to be made up of cube units, and each of those cube units in reality would be 18 inches. But we're going to start with the original cube unit and the leading edge of the original cube unit. I've given you some dimensions. We'll start out with a very specific height for that, and that's representative of 18 inches. And of course, with foreshortening, it's going to get smaller. And we'll use the diagonal method for repeating distances on this. Not only are we drawing one bookshelf that is 3 cube units wide by 2 cube units tall, but we'll draw another bookshelf that is 1 cube unit distance away from the original one and 4 cube units tall. A couple of the other things that we will be doing in this drawing are estimating the material thickness, which I think I have set at 1 inch. And then there's a 1/2 inch additional backer board on the back of both of these that we will see that we will have to add onto our drawing. A couple of the other things that begin to show up, and it's actually in this isometric view. Now, I'll probably, as we move forward, when we give you drawings and things to do, you'll probably only get orthographic views for most of them. But since we're getting started, I wanted to give you an isometric. Now, obviously, you've worked on isometric drawings, and the difference here is that this does not foreshorten. There's no convergence. We'll see that, but it does help us know which lines we need to put in here. We'll actually see more than that because I think we'll see the back edge of that backer board in some of our views. Okay, so 12 3/4, 6.5 down, 12 3/4 over. So I've got a leading edge that's going to start somewhere right in here. Just put a vertical. All my verticals are vertical. And we'll measure down 6.5. Didn't quite get there. So that's the bottom point of that leading edge. I'll measure up 2 1/8, and that gives us every dimension that we would need other than the material thickness, which we will guesstimate. I'm still going to keep everything fairly light until I feel like I've got my construction down. Go a little bit darker for that leading edge. Just like with our cubes, these lines that are moving away from us are going to go towards the vanishing point. We'll have to estimate our original cube size. The accuracy and precision of these vanishing lines will affect whether or not that multiplying this distance is accurate. So what I need to do, this is to the left of the Verizon line, and so I'll see a little bit more, or we'll draw this side a little bit wider. I'll draw this side a little bit narrower, not much, just a little bit. And you can see that this angle is a little shallower, that one's just a little bit steeper. I'm actually going to add just a tad to this right here. We'll finish that cube out and just see if it still looks correct. So my original cube unit, that feels pretty good. So my first step is ultimately to multiply that cube unit over this way and then add to it going up. And then we'll also create a space that is 1 cube unit wide, and then we'll build another bookshelf over here that's 4 cube units tall. So let's start with this diagonal method. And we will carry that center point all the way out to our right vanishing point. What I can do here is I don't actually need to draw that X on this side. I can just carry that over. One of the interesting things about drawing in perspective is that there's often a number of different ways to skin a cat, and sometimes it's just fun to, it's almost like a puzzle game to figure out the best way to find the construction, to use geometry that you already have to find the construction. Okay, so now I can come from down here, I'm going to go up through that point, meet that top edge. And do the same thing over here. And remember, we use that further line for our construction. So I'm going through that point. And from here, I just draw verticals. So I've multiplied that distance. Now we will continue, even though on our exercise earlier we just multiplied that distance by 1, what I can do is because I've brought this midpoint over to that edge and continued it out towards the right vanishing point, when I create another edge, I still have that point. I don't need to put the X back in there to continue this process. So now I've got 3. I need to go 1 cube unit up, which we could, again, you could measure that, but let's use our methods. So I'm going to go from this point through there. I could do it this way. This point through there. Since I've already got that leading edge line drawn in, that gives me the height. So the front of this bookshelf, I've got that dimension basically drawn in. I could add a dark line right here. one of the other difficult things to some of these perspective constructions is confusing which lines are vanishing, which lines are construction not vanishing lines, and which ones are object lines. So sometimes it's nice to be able to put a line in like that just to help our eye read the drawing and what we've got so far. Okay, so let's see. What I want to do is go ahead and begin to construct the second bookshelf. So what we've done here is we've constructed negative space. So I've got an 18-inch gap between the back of this bookshelf and the next bookshelf, minus the backer board, which we'll draw in a minute. But what I want to do is that next bookshelf will start right here. This will be the leading edge of that next bookshelf. And so now I need to create the thickness, which again is that common 18 inches that I'm multiplying as I go back with this method. Doing the same thing, I'm coming through this point from this corner. And this will be the back edge of my bookshelf. I'm going to go ahead and draw this on up. I don't know where it's going to stop, but I do know that it's going to be twice as tall as this. Notice what's happening with the front face of this bookshelf. As it moves closer to that vanishing point, it's just like the cubes and the 3 cube rules. Look how it's getting thinner. We're drawing it thinner, that distance compared to this one. Since we move this over, our center point is about right here, so this was to the left of our horizon line. But I already have 2 cube units going up, but now I need to multiply this distance, continue to multiply that distance moving up. I could do that a couple of different ways. I could actually do that construction over here, where I go from this point through there over to there. And continue this line up. So again, I'm kind of right here, I'm basically drawing negative space, constructing negative space. So now I'm going to go from here through, not there, but here. Let's see, the bottom of that shelf, or at least where that is, will be below the horizon line. So that shelf is going to be pretty close to on the horizon line. But I'm going to go from here through there. So this, if this bookshelf was 4 cube units tall, then that would be its height. But I can just quite simply take that distance now, carry it back towards the left finishing point, and that gives me the top of this bookshelf, which I apparently did not draw this line quite tall enough. This will be the side of that bookshelf. And now we get into one of those things where it's a little bit of a puzzle. How can I find the depth of that bookshelf moving back towards this right vanishing point? Well, I can carry this line back over there, like so, and then I can carry this point, right? Because I've got that same 18-inch thickness going this way. I can carry that point back towards that vanishing point there, and I'll get an intersection. And that intersection right there, which comes from there over to here and there back, that gives me the depth of that bookcase. Right? So now I need to flesh out everything, give it some material thickness, and then we'll talk about how to adjust that material thickness for these interior dividers. Okay, so the thickness, the typical thickness of the front edge material thickness for these shelves and dividers is 1 inch, but I'm just going to kind of guesstimate at what that could be. And so if I kind of guesstimate here, that's about 1/4 of that full 18 inches. Divide that again, 1/8. So my material thickness is going to be somewhere about right here. And I'm going to draw just with a construction line, and this is a guesstimate. One of the other things about perspective drawing, when we get to this point again, it's about making it look right. So guesstimation is a natural part of this. It would be possible to go in and calculate and divide this up into half of this into 9 equal segments and ultimately get 1 inch. But it's about resolution and what do you really need to show in a drawing. And in this drawing in particular, I think the guesstimation of that thickness is probably just fine. So what I'm doing here, I've got that thickness, and because I know that this is a square surface, where this diagonal comes through is cutting that square in half, and that gives me a 45-degree angle right here. So I know that thickness right here is the same as that thickness right here if I take that intersection point. And I can do the same thing in the back, but I don't have that diagonal, so I need to put that diagonal in of our cube unit. Now, if it was a rectangle, that would not be it would not work the exact same way. A rectangle would distort that, walking that thickness around. here, so be careful. Don't use this one. This was the one that helped us multiply that, but if I take a diagonal across from here to there, that will give me that thickness. So I've got this point. Carry that back to my vanishing point. So I've carried that material thickness all the way around to this object. I can take that same material thickness, if I bring it all the way to the front leading edge right here, I can solve that material thickness for this other bookshelf by carrying that point over to there. So there's my material thickness for that other bookshelf. And I can use that same kind of X diagonal method back here. To translate that material thickness on the bottom up the sides. Notice how thin that all of a sudden really starts to look, and that's correct. It may feel a little awkward, but that material thickness is feeling pretty thin as it moves back, similar to what it's doing right here. I can get that material thickness on the top. Putting that diagonal in. Finding that intersection, translating it. So there are two things that we need to do last. If my material thickness is 1 inch, and that makes sense for the outside, but if I've got 1 inch that's actually straddling this line, that means that there's a 1/2 inch over here and a 1/2 inch over here. There's a 1/2 inch on the top, there's a 1/2 inch on the bottom. So how do we calculate that? Well, we've already got a number of things that are working for us. What I can do is I can take this diagonal, which would give me the full material thickness over here, right? Draw it towards the right vanishing point, like so, but I don't need to carry it too far. Now I have this small square, and what I can do inside that small square is find its midpoint by drawing another diagonal right there. So that gave me that midpoint. So there's the bottom edge of those shells. I'll go ahead and darken this in. I don't have the top edge yet. See how that's coming up? Got the full thickness down here, and then the 1/2 thickness inside this cube unit at the top. So let's find this one. I just need a small diagonal in here. So now I've got that half material thickness there. I need to do that in a couple of other places. Let me see if I've got enough geometry to help me with that. I need to find the thickness to this side and that side of that line. And let's see, I do have a diagonal that comes to that point. So I'm looking at that diagonal right there. Do I have the geometry? Let's see, this comes over and hits that right there. And that right there, and this right here. I do have that geometry, at least on that one. Here's where the precision can really start to get to you, and you know, drawing on one side of the little dot or tick mark that you made versus the other side at such a small resolution, such a small size, can make the difference in this looking correct or incorrect. So just to recap right there, I'm going to use this red pen to show you. I had this diagonal already drawn in, right? And I had this line, which was 1/2 of my material thickness above the divider for our cube unit. And where that line comes to meet, since that's my new kind of thickness that I want to walk around this object, where that comes to meet that diagonal, that's giving me my material thickness to go up. And down. One note is, right now I'm using paper, just like you, but I know that some of these details are difficult to see without zooming in on this video. I will switch to using and sketching digitally once I feel that you guys have got the whole paper thing. And then I'll be able to zoom in within the videos. So there's a couple of other things that we need to pay attention to here. So if this is 1 inch, then that is 1/2 of an inch. As I mentioned, we need to put a backer board on our bookshelf, on both of them. And so I need to add 1/2 of an inch, which would be 1/2 of the material thickness, which would be what I have here, to the back of this bookshelf. And so we need to do, let's figure out the best way to add that in. Let's see. If I draw this diagonal right here, which is again that negative space that we had, negative space of 18 inches. There's my diagonal. Where that is hitting right here, I can draw a small vertical. Right there. And I'm basically doing exactly what I did right here, just back a little further. It's difficult for me to see that line. So now I've got an intersection right there that gives me my 1/2 inch. It's not as clean as it could be. I'm going to see so little of this line on the top. It's almost just going to look like a double line. Okay. Now, the interior of our shelves will have, we will see additional lines that define the interior of our shelf. So I know from this corner, I'm going to have a line going back towards that left vanishing point. So this, and it's going to come in there somewhere. The question is, how deep is this line? And so here we have another puzzle that we're going to try and solve. Well, let's see. I can assume that if I draw a line over from here, like that, is that my point? Well, no, it's not, because that's not taking into consideration the material thickness going up or the material thickness coming in. So the other thing I can do is draw this corner back in space, and draw, see where that is coming in and hitting right there. There's my height, and then I need to carry that height over. So yeah, again, a number of ways to skin a cat. This is just one of them. But now what that is if we were to draw and you look at this, this comes all the way over to the edge. I carry that around and walk it around to where it meets the back of this, so that's the back of the bookshelf, and then carry that point over. Then right here, I will see that back edge. I didn't need to do that other, I did not need to draw this line in there. And so we'll actually see a vertical line defining where this side meets the backer board, right there. So from this corner, I'm going to go back to that as well. Oops, went too far. Make sure you're defining clearly the difference between your object lines and your construction lines. Just so you know, that bookshelf is going to face out to the left. So the shelves will open up to the left side of that object. So just finish this edge, finish that. You're going to add a backer board the same way we did right here. And that is your technical 2 drawing.